Okay, right? So till now, if you observe, we have been looking at multiple verticals in terms of open source intelligence, right? We looked at the email vertical, then we looked at username OSINT, image OSINT, domains, geolocation, etc. Right? So basically phone numbers and all, and there were multiple tools available altogether. Okay, so the key point over there that we need to remember always is that it doesn't matter which tool you're using, or you should not be limited by the type of tool that you're using. Okay, so because to achieve a particular objective, there are multiple techniques that can be followed, and for each technique there are hundreds and thousands of tools out there. Okay, right? Now, let's move ahead and talk about this interesting tool called a social engineering toolkit. Okay, now if you remember, we had a fundamental question when we started off using the OSINT tools, as in how do attackers get hold of our emails? How do they get access to our emails altogether? Right? Or for the fact, according to the statistics shared by CISA, right? So nearly 90% of the cyber attacks start off with phishing. So considering the same fact, let's take a look at an interesting framework which is specifically designed to simulate and execute various social engineering attacks altogether. Okay, right? So this tool's name is called SE Toolkit or the Social Engineering Toolkit, and it's a penetration testing framework which is designed for social engineering as such. Okay, right? And the social engineering is a tactic, it's an approach that manipulates human psychology to trick individuals into maybe sometimes leaking confidential information, clicking on malicious links altogether, or basically perform actions that will compromise their security. Okay, so this SE Toolkit, it empowers cybersecurity professionals to test and enhance the security of organizations by exposing vulnerabilities related to human behavior. Okay, right? So it is said that humans are the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, right? And if you're able to secure that, your entire security ecosystem will become much more stronger. Okay, so this tool, the SE Toolkit, the Social Engineering Toolkit, it helps us understand our current scenario and helps us understand how vulnerable people are. Okay, right? Now, from an open source intelligence perspective, basically an investigations perspective, this particular tool can help us run controlled phishing attacks, creating malicious payloads, and do a lot more things as such. Okay, right? So let's go ahead and use it. And for this, we will be using a Kali Linux environment altogether. Okay, for the scope of the second part of the session, first of all the toolkits that we're going to install, we're going to install them inside Kali Linux ecosystem. Okay, and how do we open it? We just simply open the Windows start menu. We'll type Kali over here, and as you can see, we can see the Kali Linux application. When we click on it, a small a terminal will open, and depending on the speed of your system and all, it will open in a couple of seconds altogether. Okay, right? Now we need to launch the SE Toolkit as such, right? And how do we launch the GUI version of it? We will run the x-win space -s. Okay, so x space -win space -s. Okay, so when you run this, it will ask you for the Kali Linux password, basically the GUI version of the password that you have set. Okay, so we'll give it, and the Wintex version will start running. Okay, so let me just open it right away. Alright, so we are inside the Kali Linux GUI version. Okay, now if you observe, this is entirely in full screen, right? So if you basically want it to be a Windows window version, and where you want to split between or move between multiple windows altogether, you can press the F8 button. Okay, and a small pop-up menu will open where you can select full screen over here. Okay, right? You need to remember that this particular action, what it will do is it will basically rearrange the Kali Linux window size to the screen that you're using. Okay, sometimes it could be 90, it could be a 14-inch screen, a 16-inch screen, or a bigger screen altogether. Okay, so now we have basically opened up our Kali Linux environment. Okay, all the activities, all the tools that we're going to install, all the customization that we're going to do to this particular toolkit will be done inside Kali Linux. Okay, so our entire open source investigation toolkit will be built on top of Kali Linux, and we already know how powerful this particular operating system is. Okay, right? So now what we'll do is to install any kind of tool inside Kali Linux, you can either directly go to the tool's corresponding website, or you can follow a certain set of commands that I'm going to show you. Okay, right? So now to open the terminal inside Kali Linux, you can see the black color box over here, right? So you just click on it, and this is how it will look like. Okay, right? So as a best practice, before you install any kind of tool or any kind of package inside a Linux operating system, or for our Kali Linux operating system, it is always a best practice to update the repositories. Okay, so as we discussed in the previous video as well, so when you run this particular command sudo space apt space update, what it basically tells Kali Linux is so Kali Linux has a huge list of repositories where the packages keep on updating, and everybody almost on a daily basis keeps on updating the packages altogether, right? So it's always a best practice to install the latest version of all the packages, all the tools that you're going to use. Okay, right? So what I'll do is I'll first navigate to the desktop inside Kali Linux. Okay, as you can see over here, the path is not exactly desktop. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll type cd and I'll give the tilde icon and I'll give a forward slash and then mention desktop. Okay, and as soon as it's done, when I press ls, we can see like if at all, let's say if I create a particular maybe folder over here called as some random thing. Okay, let me just create it over here, and when I type ls, it basically confirms that I'm inside the Kali Linux desktop only. Okay, so let me just delete this particular folder and clear the text over here. And what did we discuss right now? Before you install any kind of tool altogether, it is always a best practice to update the package list altogether, right? So the command for that is sudo space apt space update. Okay, let me press enter, and it will ask you the password for Kali Linux, and the password is Kali. Alright, so let me just wait for it to happen. Alright, so the installation is done. It says that 74 packages can be upgraded, etc., etc. Alright, now we are inside the Kali Linux desktop altogether, right? So let me just clear the screen, and to install the SE Toolkit, the command is sudo apt install SE Toolkit space -y. So this -y basically says yes to all the prompts that would probably pop up when SE Toolkit is getting installed. Okay, so let's wait for this to happen as well. Right, so basically we have successfully installed SE Toolkit, right? So if at all you don't see any red marks or you don't see any kind of error messages over here in the terminal, it means that your SE Toolkit has been successfully installed. Okay, right? So we'll just clear it off. Okay, and before we move forward, we'll be talking about an interesting kind of attack called as credential harvesting attack. Okay, so this is basically an attack approach where attackers, the cyber criminals, they try to impersonate trusted websites or trusted entities to gain access to user credentials. Usually, usernames, passwords, or even credit card data as well. Okay, now to start SE Toolkit, all we need to do is simply type SE Toolkit. Okay, and it says that we need to run it as a root. Okay, for that, what we can do is we can simply type sudo. Sudo is basically the super user. Okay, so we'll write sudo SE Toolkit. Alright, so we'll press enter, and because we have already given the Kali password for this particular instance of the terminal, it will not ask us to give a password again. Okay, and it says whether we want to agree to the terms of service or not. I'll press Y and press enter. Okay, and as you can see over here, let me just move this a little bit to the top. Right, so as you can see over here, we have social engineering attacks, penetration testing attacks, third-party modules. If you want to update the social engineering toolkit and so on and so forth. Right, so we want to run a social engineering exercise because we want to understand how exactly attackers get their hands on the different email addresses of targets. Okay, right, so we'll press 1 over here because we want to choose the social engineering attacks. Okay, and here also we have a huge menu: spear phishing, website attacks, infectious media generator, and so on and so forth. Right, for our scope, let's go ahead with the website attack vectors. Okay, right, and then we have multiple website attack vectors altogether. We have Java applet, Metasploit browser, credential harvester, tab nubbing, webjacking, and so on and so forth. Right, so don't worry if you don't know about all these attacks as such right now. Right, so you can learn about them as and when necessary. Okay, so right now what is our scope? We want to run the credential harvester attack method, something that will harvest the credentials altogether. Okay, right, so it basically tells us that we have 3 approaches that we can follow. The first method will have a list of predefined web applications that we can use, or it will completely clone a website. The second option will completely clone a website that we choose, and it will create a similar attack vector altogether. The third method will allow you to import your own website altogether. Okay, right, so let's say we want to clone, let's say you're working in a company where GitHub.com is used very commonly, right? So it's kind of like a bread and butter for the company altogether. And you want to understand how secure or how security driven your other employees are. Okay, so what you can do is in such kind of a situation, what security professionals would do is they'll go ahead and run a phishing attack against their own company itself, trying to understand how many people will fall victim to it. Okay, so let's take the same scenario. Let's try to understand this entire concept using that particular scenario, right? So let's say we work in a company where we typically use GitHub almost on a daily basis. Okay, so we'll write github.com, and once the website opens, we can see the sign in option over here. It takes us to the login page where we have two entry points, two input points, one where we can enter the username or email address, the other one is a password, and we see a sign in button in green color. Okay, right? So let's go ahead and open our site cloner. We want to clone this particular target site. Okay, a best practice would be to ensure that the URL has /login or it has a dedicated login page. Okay, right? Which in our case we have it. So how do we copy or clone this entire site? We'll be using the site cloner option. So we'll basically select the option as 2. Okay, and it basically asks us, do you want to have or do you want to have an IP address to post back in Harvester or Tabnami? Okay, in simple terms, it basically is asking whenever I grab the information, where should I report back to? Alright, okay. So in our case, because we are running the same thing in our own system, I just simply write 127.0.0.1. Okay, right. So basically, this is the localhost address, and if you type localhost or 127.0.0.1, you will be taken to your own system altogether. Okay, so I'll just press this, or you can also go ahead with the IP address that is mentioned over here. This is basically the IP address of the Kali Linux machine that we are using, right? The operating system that we are using. Okay, for now, I'm just mentioning it as a localhost, and it asks me the URL that I want to clone. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead, go to the URL, I'll copy this, Control C, open my terminal again, and then this time I'll just right click on it and click on paste clipboard. You can also press Control Shift and V to paste it inside your terminal. For now, what I'll do is I'll just run this particular command. Okay, right. So it's cloning, and it says that the cloning is done, and the social engineer toolkit credential harvester attack is running on port 80. Correct. So most of the steps are pretty clear. So we have the original github.com/login page where it's shown as sign into GitHub, etc. etc. Similarly, if I go ahead and open our 127.0.0.1, basically our local host, it also shows me the exact same page, right? So it says sign in into GitHub. It also says sign in into GitHub, right? It has username or email address. The original one also has username and email address, right? And I'm only able to identify that this is a fake or a clone web page is because of the URL. Right, so we'll talk about how URLs can be manipulated at a later point. Okay, right now let's assume that we have generated this particular clone page altogether, and we have uploaded it onto a web server, and we are hosting it altogether. Okay, and let's assume that we have sent it to a target also. Okay, and let's say they opened the link and they found out that they'll have to log in using GitHub. Okay, so let's say they gave the email address as owoodflint@gmail.com. Okay, and the password could be let's for the sake of testing, we'll just give it as this one. Okay, and when they click on sign in, nothing happens. Whereas if you but there is something that is really curious over here, right? So when the moment I clicked on sign in, nothing happened, as in I did not get logged into GitHub altogether. But what happened is that page automatically redirected to the original login page that I was actually trying to log in the first place itself. Okay, right? So let's go to the terminal and see if we can find something interesting. Okay, so on the back end we had our SC Toolkit server running, ready to listen and ready to capture any and all information that comes its way. Okay, right? And then we also basically what we did is we also started typing the email address, started typing the password altogether. And here, as you can see, a possible username field form, possible password field form. Okay, so you can actually see. Let me just scroll it down. You can actually see the email address that we actually gave, owoodflint@gmail.com, and the password was 123456790, and so on and so forth. Right? So this is basically how you can run an SC Toolkit credential harvester attack. Okay, like so there are a lot of other attack approaches in SC Toolkit. You can always explore them, but remember, do them in a controlled environment. Okay, right. So let's just stop the server, and the command is Control C, and we press enter, and here we can mention 99 to return to the main menu, again 99, and again 99 to exit the social engineering toolkit. Okay, let's get back. All right. So we basically understood how to install the SC Toolkit as in the social engineering toolkit, and how we can actually leverage it to clone a particular website altogether, end-to-end clone. It looks like an exact mirror copy of the original web page. Okay, right. And once that is done, we gave an IP address that was listening. Okay, right. And in the last stage, we chose the particular web template that we wanted to use. Okay, and we configured our social engineering toolkit, and we understood how to launch a phishing attack altogether. Right. Okay. So in a real world scenario, attackers what they would do is they would probably set up this entire thing on a server, or probably initiate a listener or some program that will actually grab all the information. Okay, and they'll create an IP address, or they'll associate an IP address for that server and mention that particular IP address into our attack. Okay, and then they would probably use a fake domain name when sending the link to you. Okay, for example, instead of saying GitHub GITHUB, they ended up creating a new email address or a new domain name that says G1THUB. Okay, and when the URLs are so small and the URL bar itself is so small, there is a high chance that people might overlook it and they might think of the one as an I. So instead of GitHub, we have G1THub.com. Okay, and once we click on that particular malicious link or maybe interact with it and give them the credentials altogether, once they get access to your credentials, a lot of things can happen. Okay, for now, let's assume that we have got access to the OwoodFlint email, the target email that we're looking into, and the password as well. Okay, let's move ahead and see what we can do with it. Okay, right. So moving on, when we talk about collecting data as such, you see, in general, right now, in fact, we have already discussed that there's billions and billions of GBs and terabytes of data that is getting generated over the web on different services, different networks, different protocols altogether. And can we, practically speaking, sit and take each and every bit and piece of information, bit and piece of data, try to make sense of it and go through the entirety of data right as soon as possible? The answer is no, right? Because there is tons of data available out there, and gathering all the information from every single place, and that to one at a time, will definitely become a very highly time-consuming task. Okay, and that is when automated open source intelligence toolkits come into picture. And Spiderfoot, the one that we see over here right now, is one such powerful, highly powerful, multi-platform intelligence gathering automation tool. Okay, it's widely used in cybersecurity, used in reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is another word for intelligence gathering, and threat intelligence as well. Okay, so it is basically used to automate the entire open source intelligence gathering process to find anything about your target, let it be about the emails, the domain names, or anything as such. It will bring everything to a single tool altogether. Okay, right. So to automate open source intelligence approaches, this tool, the Spiderfoot, queries over more than 100 public information sources, and it processes all that information and gives you intelligence. Remember, data, information, intelligence. Data is what? Bits and pieces, right? When you consolidate that, when you arrange that, when you process that in some or the other manner, it gives rise to information, something that makes sense. Okay, and from that information, if at all you're able to extract actionable pieces of information, those actionable pieces of information would be called as intelligence, right? So Spiderfoot queries over more than 100 information sources altogether, and it processes all the intelligence data from domain names, email addresses, name, IP addresses, subdomain, subnet, Bitcoin addresses, human name, username, and so on and so forth, right? All we need to do is specify the target, choose the modules that we want to run, and Spiderfoot will basically perform the whole job for us. Okay, we'll start all the way from collecting the data to build a full profile of anything that we are investigating. Okay, right? So let's go ahead and try this out as well. All right, so here we are back in our Kali Linux. So let's just open the terminal again, and as usual, we'll have to navigate to the desktop folder. Okay, so what we'll do is cd:/desktop. So we're in the desktop, and as usual, the best practice is to run the command, which is apt space update. So we'll run sudo space apt space update. Okay, let's just wait for it to run. We'll give the password. Right, so it's run properly. Okay, now basically to install Spiderfoot, we can actually go to its official repository and then get it from there. Okay, let's search for Spiderfoot. Right, so we just open the GitHub link, and if we scroll down a little, we'll be able to see the installation commands over here. So the command is git clone https etc spiderfoot.git. Okay, so we'll just mention it over here. We'll just paste it, right click, paste clipboard, press enter. So inside the desktop, what will happen is a new folder will get created, and this entire repository will be copied into that particular folder. Okay, so we are done with it. What's the next step? cd space spiderfoot. So we'll just say cd spiderfoot, and let me just clear this off. The next step is to install Python 3 pip. Okay, so basically Python 3 pip is an installer for Python packages. Okay, and SE toolkit, Spiderfoot, and a lot of such commonly used investigation tools as such. They need certain Python packages to be installed. Okay, right. So what we'll do is sudo apt install Python 3-pip. Okay, so basically I've already installed pip, but in case if you did not install it, you should be able to see an end-to-end and basically an installation process altogether. Okay, right. So what's the next step? We need to use pip3 to install the requirements.txt. So I'll write pip3 space install space -r, and then we'll mention requirements.txt. It basically means there's a file called as requirements.txt inside Spiderfoot. Let's wait for this entire process to happen. Okay, right. Alright, so the installation part is done. Alright, so let's just clear this off, and to run the spiderfoot.py tool, we'll just need to type python 3 space /sf.py. We'll just mention it like this, and followed by 127.0.0.1:5001. Okay, right, so let's just run this, and what will basically happen is it will initiate a new server on the port called as 5001. So there's a small mistake in the command that I run over here. It's that I need to mention -l over here, right? So as you can see, -l, then IPN port. Okay, right, so I'll just press enter over here, and this gets started, and I can basically access it using the browser. Okay, so you can access the Spiderfoot application using the browser. Okay, so how do we do that? 127.0.0.1:50. Let's just look at the port 5001. Okay, so 001. And when you press enter, this is how your Spiderfoot window will look like. Okay, and because we have done a newly like a first time installation, we will not see any existing scans over here. Okay, and what information do we have? We have this email address called as owoodflint@gmail.com. Okay, right, so we'll go to new scan over here, and as you can see, you can scan anything altogether, right? So you have the domain names, IPv4 addresses, IPv6 addresses, subnet, Bitcoin address, email address, phone number, human name, and so on and so forth, right? So basically what Spiderfoot does is it goes through all the different modules that are available with it. Okay, for example, if you click on by module, you have abstract API, AdGuard DNS, Bing, Bitcoin Finder, Census, and so on and so forth, right? So basically, if at all we were doing the same exercise manually, we would have to go to each and every website, interact with that, give this particular email address, try to get the information back, bring it back, document it, then try to create intelligence from that, and a lot of other things as such. And that too, this entire process is for one website. What if there are hundreds and thousands of websites altogether, right? It's a lot of time taking process, which is exactly why we have been using these automated tools altogether. Okay, right. So now, what is the scan that we're going to do? We want to scan the target email. Okay, and what's the email over here? owoodflint@gmail.com. Okay, and I just press enter, and I basically told Spiderfoot to run all the possible scans and get anything and everything that it can. Okay, so as you can see, the scan has started running, and you can see the summary over here, right? So it's an email address, it says raw data from APIs or regional registries altogether. It's a possible username as well, and here you can see that there are 2 or 3 basically unique items that have been identified. And when you click on browse, you will be able to see all this particular piece of information. Okay, similarly, you can see a graph, a pictorial representation of what exactly it is. You can configure the scans, you can get the logs and everything as such. Okay, for now, let's say that this particular scan is completed. Let's assume that it has completed, and we have 3 basic interesting pieces of information. Okay, so we have the email address, which is literally owoodflint@gmail.com, and it was identified with the same email address as such. Okay, let's say you want to look for raw data from APIs and all. So as you can see that this particular account, this particular username has a particular account on gravatar.com, right? So if at all we were doing this manually, or if at all we did not have access to a browser based tools altogether, we would face a lot of challenges. We would probably end up spending a lot of time to just get this particular piece of information. Okay, right? Similarly, if you go to browse, there is a possibility that this first part, as we discussed in the previous section, so the first part over here of a particular email address can always be considered as a particular username altogether. Okay, right? So what is this doing? It's going to multiple data sources, bringing all the data points and converting them into information, right? So it's just giving us information that says I have found a particular email address, I found a raw data, and I've also found a username as such. As simple as that. Okay, so let's let this scan run in the background, and let's get back and move on with the next part. Okay, alright. So basically, we installed Spiderfoot and we understood how we can use it. Okay, see, a very important point that we need to understand over here is open source intelligence or OSINT investigation is very, very important for data collection, especially when you're investigating anything on the internet. Okay, let it be a person, a company, or an application, or anything as such. The main issue in most situations is how much time you can spend on that particular task, right? I mean, just think about it. In just a short amount of time, we have explored multiple OSINT verticals like images, emails, usernames, domains, geolocation, and so on and so forth, and we got a bigger picture that there are hundreds and thousands of tools available for each of those verticals altogether. But doing everything manually is not scalable, especially in a very rapidly changing field like cybersecurity and OSINT. Okay, and such situations are when we would need to use automated tools like Spiderfoot and another such automation tool, or just like Spiderfoot. In fact, it's much more powerful than Spiderfoot. There's another tool called as Maltego. Okay, so it's considered to be the Swiss Army knife of OSINT investigations due to its versatility, ease of use, the amount of data and correlations it generates. Okay, so it uses various libraries to extract data on maybe target individuals, organizations, networks, Bitcoin addresses, everything as such. Okay, so it's kind of like the go-to tool for digital detectives, you could say. Okay, so much so that it is used by tech people, law enforcement people, financial institutions, government organizations, and many more. Retail, education, research, non-profit, anything as such. Right? In fact, Robert McArdle, the director of cybercrime research at Trend Micro is a highly popular security company. He says that from the ability to access many different data sources through one tool to the advanced visualizations, Maltego is an absolutely essential part of modern cybercrime research. So much so that the first thing that he looks at when someone says that they're a cybersecurity professional is that whether they are using Maltego or not. It's that popular, that powerful. Okay, and before we actually start using this particular tool, we need to be clear with a couple of definitions. Right? We need to understand entities that basically represent specific data points. For example, your email address is an entity, your phone number is an entity, your domain name is an entity, and so on and so forth. Right? So basically, when you have a data point, you manually go to the tool and you manually interact with it, and you come back. Right? Obviously, so the entire process when you automate it, that is nothing but transforms. Okay, so transforms are the functions for data processing. Think of it like this: these transforms basically automate the entire manual set of actions that we would generally do. Okay, then we'll talk about the data sources. These are external data repositories. It could be OSINT information, just the databases, proprietary sources, or anything as such. Okay, right? Similarly, once you're done with the entire investigation as such, you should also be able to replicate that information or report that kind of information. Right? Obviously, so graphs in Maltego, they help you create a visual representation of the entire investigation that you've done. Okay, we can then either share these graphs as images or generate an entire report based on this altogether. Okay, right now. Basically, let's go ahead and install and set up Maltego in our system. Okay, right. So let's go ahead with Kali. Alright, so here we are in our Kali Linux, and the target email is still running, and it says that it has found 2 usernames altogether or 2 elements altogether. Let's just give it a quick browse, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so it says it has found two data elements that confirm this particular username. It says it's a normal accounts source module and Gravatar also. Okay, so we'll just quickly minimize this and we'll just quickly go ahead and open Maltego altogether. Okay, to open that, you see the blue color dragon icon over here. That's the applications menu. It's similar to the start menu in your Windows systems. Okay, right, and inside this we need to search for Maltego. Right, so by default, when you install Kali from scratch, Maltego is not pre-installed. So you'll have to install it inside Kali Linux using the installer file that is available over here. And in most situations, depending on which version of Kali Linux you're installing, there is always a chance that you might need to update Maltego right after installation. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. Alright, so it says this will install Maltego over here. Let's press Y, let's press enter and Kali. Alright, so let's just wait for it to happen. Alright, it says press enter to finish, so let's press enter and Maltego has been installed. Okay, to start it, once again we'll type Maltego over here and the first option is what we want to use. Okay, so once you start off with Maltego for the first time, you will need to configure it from scratch. Okay, as in you basically would define which version of Maltego you want to use, what kind of account you want to use, and so on and so forth. Right? Okay, so in our case we are going to work with Maltego CE Community Edition, which is the free version of it. Okay, so we click on Maltego CE run and a small setup window should open in a couple of seconds. Yes, so as you can see over here, it asks us whether we want to configure Maltego or not, and we'll just quickly click on accept and we'll click on next. So usually you should be able to see the terms and conditions as such. So let me just click on next over here. It asks whether I want to have captcha or not. It looks like it's some kind of an issue. Let me just scroll up. And this is where we can see, right? So obviously, for the first time you're using Maltego, you will have to register yourself on the community edition site. Okay, so click on here and let me just walk you through the process. I'll do the registration in the background. All right, so let me just click on accept over here and observe that the activation link for your Maltego account will be sent over email. So you cannot use any fake emails or temporary emails over here. Okay, you'll have to use a valid email address as such. Okay, so let's say I give my email address. All right, so we'll just name my first name as Abhinav, surname as D, and India. So we'll just scroll down to India and select the relevant things. Okay, right. So we'll just give a phone number, maybe 98765 43210, right? Randomly. If you're a student, you can mark it as a student. You can also give your phone number as such, but it's primarily based on the email address validation. Okay, right. So we'll type organization name as maybe let's say let's call it Google for now. Okay, so I'm just randomly giving out information so that we'll be able to move on faster. Okay, so let's call it security engineer or let's say OSINT analyst. Alright, so organization URL is not mandatory. Focus is primarily cybersecurity operations. The main use case would be threat intelligence. Alright, so we need to set a password as well. Be very, very careful when you set this password. If you forget it, you will not be able to get your access account back unless and until you go ahead with the forgot password process altogether. Okay, right. So let me just give the password over here. Okay, so I'll just repeat the password. Okay, so I'll just click on I'm not a robot and it asks me to confirm if it's a bus. Let's do that. Click on verify. Click on register. Okay. Alright, so it says that my CE registration is successful. Okay, so ideally, once you're done with this particular step, you should get an email confirmation to the email that you have mentioned over here. Okay, right. So this is really, really important. You should be able to access that particular email address so that you'll be able to confirm your account with that. Okay, right. So we'll just close this tab. We'll just minimize this part, and then we'll go back to the login page. Okay, right. So it might take a couple of seconds to load, or it might not show you the entire details unless you scroll it. Okay, right. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead, I'll check my email, I'll confirm that particular message, and then we'll continue with that. Okay, right. Alright, so we're done with the email account activation. So remember, once you initially register yourself onto Maltego, you will get an email confirmation to the email address that you provided. Okay, right. So let me just mention the corresponding email over here. Okay, so let me just give the password as well. And you have to solve the captcha. It's 801H. Okay, so let's see if it registers us. So it says the captcha was incorrect. Try again. So we'll just go ahead and go ahead with this thing. It asks us to give the proper captcha. So we'll click on back. It will go ahead and we'll just try it out again. Okay, right. And it says UQWL. Let's hope it is correct. It was incorrect again, and here we are. Let's just type CHWY and alright. So we've given the email address and the password, and if the captcha is correct, we'll be taken to the next step. Okay. So the next step basically shows us the entire information about Maltego that we have. Okay, so the first name, surname, email address, and all. And basically, the moment you register yourself, you will have something called as an API key that is allocated to you, and it says that it's valid until September 28, 2025. Okay, so we accepted the license agreement, logged in, we created an account over here, and then let's move ahead and install the transforms that we need. Okay, so we'll just go up, we'll just scroll up, and this is where we'll be able to see the summary of the entire progress of transforms that have been installed. Okay, so it says that 13 application servers, 141 transforms, 191 entities, etc., have been installed. Okay, let's move ahead and do not check this out. So we can it's not necessary. So we'll move ahead. We'll set the default web browser. The privacy mode is normal, and you can select and open a blank graph and let me play around, or you can actually open an example graph, or you can just simply start off with the bare bones version of it. Okay, click on finish, and we are done with the initial installation of this tool called as Maltego. Okay, so usually you will definitely need to acknowledge the privacy notice. Let me just maximize this, and it says that there are 39 updates available. Let's just quickly update it all together. So we'll click on next and let this process continue. Alright, so once this installation is done, you'll be asked whether you want to restart Maltego right now or later. For our case, let's just quickly restart Maltego right away. And this is how you see that its site has been restarted. And this is where we'll be able to see the entire window altogether. Let's wait for a couple of seconds and it'll open up. Okay, right. Now, so what did we do so far? We basically set up Maltego Community Edition. We configured it to our system, basically our Kali Linux, inside our Kali Linux, and now we have the Swiss Army knife of all OSINT investigations altogether. Okay, so remember, when you're running Maltego for the first time, you need to agree to the license agreement. You will have to create a Maltego community user account. You'll have to use your email address, password, and everything as such. Okay, so right. So we have basically configured Maltego to run for the first time. Okay, and once you load, this is how it will look like. Sometimes you might get a blank graph, sometimes you might not, but this is the start page that says, that gives you information about the Maltego Community Edition. Let's just close this. You can simply click on the start page and you can simply close it. Okay, right? And what do we know about Maltego? There are entities, there are transforms, there are graphs that we can generate. Okay, so this is the transform hub. This is where you basically install all the different kinds of transforms, right? Let me just click on refresh so that everything gets refreshed. And if at all there are any kind of updates, this update button will help us install them. Okay, right? Let's say if you only want to look for data breaches, there are certain specific type of transforms that are available over here. Let's say instead of data breaches, you only want to use personal identifiers. Your open sanctions, clear bit, flight aware, little and so on and so forth. Okay, right? Let's say for now we want to install certain specific types of transforms. Okay, right? So let me just see if I can reduce the size of this. No, it's not working. All right. So basically, the list of transforms that I'm going to install right now will be provided to you in the playbook. You can install them one by one. For now, let's just understand how you can install a particular transform altogether, right? And what's a transform? Basically, a script that automates all our manual actions and brings back the data that we need. Okay, right. So we'll just click on case file entities. So once you click on this, it will look something like this. And remember, you need to click on the install option over here, and you'll see a small pop-up that asks you for confirmation. And just like we did the updates and all, the other entities will also be installed. Case file entities or the other transforms will also be installed in the same manner. Okay, right. So this is done, and 107 entities have been added. Let's say we want to use search transform CE as a community edition. Remember, CE basically means community edition. Okay, right. So we will be using certain transforms like have been pond, DNS twist, docking transforms, and so on and so forth, right? So let's install DNS twist as well. Let me just close it. The details. We'll click on install, click on yes, and it will be installed. Okay, right. So let me just go ahead and install the rest of the transforms as well. Okay, right. Alright, so basically what I've done is I've gone ahead and spent some time to install all the necessary transforms that we will need for our particular exercise altogether, right? So till now we have understood what exactly is Maltego, how powerful it is, how popular it is, and how diverse it is altogether. Okay, so let's go ahead and basically what we have done is we have installed all the necessary transforms altogether. Okay, right? So the list of all these transforms like image analyzer, have a bin bond, hunter, or probably login soft OSINT, IP info, or probably social link CE, tin I, URL scan.io, wayback machine, and so on and so forth, right? So basically if you observe, there are many tools inside or many transforms over here that perform the same activities that we would do with the existing browser-based tools altogether, right? So we understood that point. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly close the transform hub, create a new graph altogether. Let's get back and try to understand the case study, and then we'll try to apply it altogether. Okay, so basically these are the different transforms that we have we have installed: Google Docking, have a bin bond, IP info, URL scan.io, social link CE, wayback machine, scam advisor, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so these are not limited. We'll share the necessary list with you. You have understood how exactly you can install a particular transform, and then for the particular action item or the project that we're going to do is to footprint a person of interest, or you can also consider it as where we get an email address and we perform a real-time investigation on it from the OSINT perspective on a malicious email altogether. Okay, right? You can also consider it as a much more bigger term or a much more umbrella term where you're trying to footprint a person of interest. Okay, right? For this, what we have is, let's say we have a particular file. Let's just open this. It's investigating malicious email with Maltego. Let's say we have heard about spam emails and all, right? Let's assume that you have received a spam email from someone called as Mr. Sultan Mahmood Popal. Okay, where the email address is a little sketchy, isn't it? It says luisennis@optusnet.com.au. Okay, so this particular au.au is similar to .in and .tech as such. Okay, so this particular domain name or domain ID basically means this is an Australia-oriented email address. But if you look at it, he claims to be this person, Mr. Sultan Mahmood Popal. He claims to be from California. He claims to be an assistant manager at a US bank group altogether, and at a California regional office. Someone whose email is fully registered primarily in the Australian ecosystem altogether. They're coming over and claiming to be an assistant manager for a California regional office altogether. Okay, right. So this is basically the data point that we're going to use, the email address. Right. So what would a generic person do when they see a spam email? Either they'll feel scared about it, thinking that some people have got access to my data, I should be extremely careful, or they would probably simply delete it and not care about it at all. But because now we are OSINT practitioners, it's imperative that we try to investigate that particular email, try to find out much more information about it, right? So we currently have a single data point. Let's see if we can generate even more data points as such using this particular email address as such. Okay, right. So for this, we'll go ahead to our our Kali altogether. All right. So this is let's assume that we have received a spam email from someone called as Mr. Sultan Mahmood Popal. But a curious thing over here is the email address is luisennis@optusnet.com.au. Okay, so this extension that .au is similar to websites having .in, like Amazon.in, Flipkart.in as such. This .in basically represents that the website is related to India. Similarly, .au represents that this particular website or email address is basically associated with the Australian ecosystem, right? Okay, so we understood that point. So the name is something else, the email address is something else altogether, and this person claims to be from California, from a California regional office. If you observe over here, this is an email address which is specifically associated with the Australian ecosystem. There is no guarantee that it can or may be opened across the world altogether. It may or may not support it. So this seems sketchy. Okay, so now in such a situation where you, as an end user, you receive a spam email, there are two things that you would probably do, right? One, you will ignore it, let it be there in the spam folder until it gets deleted altogether. Or there is also a chance that you might start panicking, saying that there are so many people who already know my information and this is creating a lot more danger for me. That's one other perspective. But now, because we have explored the world of open source intelligence, we have understood the intelligence life cycle altogether. We basically understood different approaches of open source intelligence altogether. We are OSINT practitioners now, right? And as OSINT practitioners, we need to understand, we need to go a little deeper, perform a little bit of an investigation to see what information we can gather from this just one single data point. Okay, right? So here, it is important to understand the data points as such. Okay, so there are three categories of data points: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Okay, so primary data points are the direct data points. In the sense, you already have the information with you, or you can directly use that data point in your investigation as such. Okay, secondary data points are gathered from the primary ones. As in, let's say you use a username, and from that you gather a MySpace account. From there, if at all you start pivoting, that MySpace account would become a secondary data point. Okay, so the data points that get generated after the secondary data point will be called as tertiary, and so on and so forth. Okay, so here what we'll do is we'll use this particular email address, luisennis@optusnet.com/.au. Okay, so that is what we want to use. Alright, so let me just minimize this, and what I'll do is I'll use that particular email address altogether. Okay, right. Alright, so we are here in our Kali Linux. Okay, and here if you see entity palace, you can have cryptocurrency. Let me just close Runby over here. Bitcoin address, Bitcoin block height, and a lot of entities altogether. Right, educational institutions, gangs, politicians, banners, IPv4 addresses, and so on and so forth. Right now, what information do we have? An email address. Right, so you can click on the search bar over here, type email, and you can see that an email address entity is available. You select it and drag it over here. Double click on this and paste the email address that we have just found. Okay, right, and because we are not fully clear about what exactly we are looking for, so we'll run all the available transforms on this particular element. Okay, so let me just minimize this a little and maybe drag it a little up there and right click on it, click on standard all transforms altogether. Okay, sometimes because we have installed multiple transforms altogether, so they might ask you to confirm certain things. Okay, for example, you might need to accept the disclaimer altogether. Okay, right. So you'll have to scroll down, go through each and everything, select the disclaimer, accept it, and then move ahead. Okay, right. So as you can see, there are two disclaimers in this particular scenario. Okay, right. So we'll just click on run and let's wait for it to happen. And at the bottom right corner, you can see that there's a small progress bar over here. Right. You might get certain pop-ups depending on whether you have the API keys, whether you have the permissions or not. We just quickly click on dismiss over here. Okay, we'll dismiss all, dismiss. So all these pop-ups are not necessary for now. Okay, on the right side, you can see the entire overview of how using just a single piece of data point, a single primary data point, we were able to generate such a huge tree altogether, a huge graph altogether, and you can see that multiple things have already happened. Okay, so let me just scroll in, zoom in, and show you how these data points look like. Okay, right. So let me just scroll up a little bit. Right. So what has basically happened over here? We have given it a particular email address, right? And if you look at it, there are 3 data points in this. One is the username part, the first half of the email address. The second is the domain name part, just the optus.net.com.au, right? The third one is the entire email address itself, right? And the outputs, the outcomes for this particular step that we have taken will also be in the same lines. Okay. For example, if you consider just the username Luis Ennis, so we can see that we have something called as Luis Ennis over here, here, and here. Okay. So we have 3 unique data sets or data points or nodes in terms of Maltego, which are directly related to the the username part. Okay. And how do I confirm it? As you can see over here, I've selected Luis Ennis over here, and this is basically a Maltego MySpace transform. Okay. Right. And it basically has 6 properties that says the name is Luis Ennis, found from a profile URL, it's a UID, and this is the image from where this profile URL was grabbed, and so on and so forth. Right. So let's click on OK. Similarly, we can see that there is a particular alias in the language of Maltego. Alias literally translates to username. Okay. Right. So it says there's a single property that says 13462196 and so on and so forth. Right. So we close this off. Similarly, we found another Luis Ennis, and this is also possibly an alias. Right. So if you observe, these are the things that we would manually do. Right. So we have an email address. We'll assume that the first part is a username. We'll search for it online using multiple tools, and we'll write things down something on these lines. Right. That is exactly what Maltego has been doing. Okay. Similarly, if you look at the optus.net.com.au and all, you can see that this particular DNS or this particular domain has been identified, and any other relevant domains that are associated with this particular URL have also been, this particular email address have been identified. Okay. Right. So we have got a lot of information already. Right. So what's the next step? We have run all the transforms altogether. Okay. And it says that it is compromised, as you can see up here. So this particular part, online spam bot, is basically like this is where it was identified. This particular email was identified. Okay. Right. So it says that have been pond has identified this particular email as part of the data breach that was conducted or that was basically associated with online spam bot. Okay. So let me just click on OK, and we have lots and lots of information altogether. But if you scroll down a little bit, you can see a lot of documents over here where probably that entire email address would have been visible. But a really interesting thing that we see over here is a URL, a unique URL altogether. Right. So let's double click on it and see what it tells us about. Okay. So it says that it's a user uploads. We have free hacks, B3ED, and so on and so forth. But it says 838K, roughly around 8.3 lakhs or something like that, and it looks like some kind of file. Okay, right. So what we'll do is, so if you look at it, the upload happyteam.org:8080 could be any malicious website altogether, right? But what is unique in this entire thing is this potential username, right? So free hacks, B3ED. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just copy it, click on OK. If at all you want, you can actually run rest of the transforms on this particular element as well. But for now, what we'll do is, because we're kind of exploring this particular tool, trying to understand how we can investigate a particular target, try to understand whether it's malicious or not, what we'll do is we'll keep things as simple as possible. Okay, right? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead to Google, and this particular scan is still running. So we'll just open our browser altogether. We'll go to google.com. Okay, so. And what we'll do is we'll just simply use the Google search techniques to run this particular thing, free hacks B3ED as a username. And if you observe, we just got 7 results. Have you ever seen a Google page, basically a Google search page returning just 7 results? No, right? Okay, so let's take a look at what all these things talk about. Okay, so it says it's probably a clone altogether. There's a website, informal website as such, Talbot County, Maryland, government related thing. Okay, right? So it says detention, election board and all. Let's not touch it for now. Okay, but the 2 interesting parts over here is this thing, anyrun.com or app.any.run/report, and this urlscan.io report. Okay, right. So urlscan.io is a tool which basically scans an entire URL and takes multiple snapshots of it in real time. Okay, right. So it says malware analysis. Right. So it's not exactly the same path to the file, but we understand that it's the same user. Okay, and based on whatever information is mentioned over here, nearly 4.3 lakh extremely high quality mail and password combinations. Okay, right. So it says that this user has been selling or probably sharing these hidden or stolen data dumps as such. Okay, remember when we discussed about Roy Hunt collecting data dumps and actually creating the Have I Been Pond tool, right? Okay, so this is an example of a data dump. Alright, so similar to us, someone might have actually identified this particular URL, and because they did not want to execute it or open it in their own system, they're using a tool called as AnyRun. Okay, any.run. Basically, it can be called as a sandbox, a controlled environment where you can run malware files and everything as such to try to understand how exactly they work and all. Okay, right. So we can see that it's a malicious activity. Okay, and it opens Chrome.exe. It feels a little suspicious altogether. Right. So the key point is this one, malicious activity. Okay, and when you scroll down a little, we can see the video and screenshots as such. Okay, so let's go ahead, move around and see what it opens. Right. So as you can see over here, this thing opens into this website called as cardingworld.ru threads and 157 nearly 1.5 lakhs high quality combo list IPTV stream etc file. Okay, right. So then we move ahead and it starts opening multiple pages and it starts rolling altogether, loading altogether, and we can see that there are multiple files in the same lines which could probably be malicious files altogether. Right. So what do we understand from this one thing? One, that this particular user that we are looking at, this free hacks B3ED or something like that. So this person user is highly malicious, and they have been selling these passwords continuously for ever since a couple of years altogether. So if you can see this, this analysis was done on February 2022. Okay, right. So what does uploadhappyteam.org tell us about this? Let's take a look at it. Right. So it has been contacted in one IP in one country across one domain to perform one HTTP transaction. Okay, so if you look over here, 157K high quality combo list.txt. Right. So this is the screenshot, and this is how the username and password combinations will look something like this. Right. So maybe Sally @ something, and the password could be popcorn as such. Right. So this basically gives us a brief idea that yes, this particular user, this free hacks B3ED user, is a malicious person. Okay, and they have been selling data or probably misusing data and selling it across multiple domains altogether. And there is a possibility. If you remember, we talked about this email address becoming 3 data entities altogether. One would be the username. We understood about it using the MySpace account and all. Right. The second one would be the domain name. It analyzed the domain name and found out certain associated files regarding that. Okay, right? And similarly, it considered the entire email as a whole, and it found out that this particular email could possibly be associated with this particular URL, right? So that was the information it directly got from Maltego. Then what we did is we applied the Google searching techniques, and then we understood that this particular user to which this URL belongs to, this user, this free hacks B3ED, is a new data point, right? It's a secondary data point, and we understood, we gathered a lot of other information from that, saying that this particular user is known to sell passwords, right? And when this particular URL itself is talking about a huge data set of passwords and emails, so there is a high chance that this entire email address could have been a part of this particular database as such. Okay, from this, what can we infer? What do we understand from all of this? One, we used a single data point which converted into 3 data points altogether and gave us a plethora of information altogether. Yes, right? The second thing is the secondary data points. The uploadhappyteam.org, that particular URL acted as a second data point, and we understood that it is potentially malicious. Yes, okay. So all this is pieces of information. If you combine that, try to analyze it, and try to come up with a particular analysis or an understanding of it, we can safely say, or we can safely assume, we can take an intelligent decision that one, we should not interact with any kind of spam emails altogether, even if they ask you to respond on the same email. And the second thing is, there is always a chance that this particular email could have been part of a data breach, and someone might have found or got access to that kind of data set, and they are using that particular email address to impersonate this actual person called as Luis Ennis. Right? So Luis Ennis as such. Okay, right. So this is how you interpret, design, build a graph in Maltego. Okay, right. So we have understood about entities, we have understood about transforms, we understood how to run a particular investigation and how to actually get information from it. Okay, right. Now let's also take a look at these interesting documents that we see over here. Right. So let's go ahead, copy this URL and go to our browser, and let's just see what it tells us. Right. So remember, it could be multiple things. The name could match, the the domain name could match, and so on and so forth. It says it's a more recent document, 21 September 2018, and it's a report to creditors along with certain usernames and passwords as such. Okay. So this is basically a leaked document which could be associated with that particular email address altogether. Right. So let me just minimize this. Okay. So similarly, there are lots and lots of documents available over here. Right. How do you save this? You are done with the investigation. You identified, you came to a conclusion, you found out a couple of extra data points as such. Right. Now, if you want, you can actually choose each and every data point, the secondary data point, and start running another transform or another entire investigation on that one thing altogether. Okay. Right. For our case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pause over here. In a real world scenario, people don't stop until they identify who that free hacks B3ED guy is. Okay. Right. So let's take a look at how we can save this. Right. So to save it, we'll just press Control Enter, and we'll just go to desktop. All right. And here we'll mention that phishing mail. Let's call it a phishing mail investigation. Okay, so it will be saved as Maltego graph MTGL. We'll just quickly save it. All right. Now, once you're done with this, how do you publish this information? Right. So you've done an investigation, you found out a lot of information about it, and you want people to know that you've actually done it. All right. For that, you can go to the import export bar, and here you can export this entire graph as an image. Okay. And as a best practice, what you could do is you can just select JPG. Okay, and export it all together. Right. So this particular graph will be generated as an image. Okay. To open it, you can click on the folder icon, go to desktop, open folder, and here you can see the phishing mail investigation report as such. Okay. Right. So let's just looks like this. Basically looks a little smaller than expected. So what I'll do is I'll close the entity palette. I'm just making this entire window a little bigger so that the graph can be taken as a picture. Okay. So I'll just scroll down, export graph as image. I'll click on whole graph just to ensure that the entire graph is covered. Okay, right, and we'll just replace this particular thing. Okay, right. So we are done with this, and we'll just go over here. We'll just open this phishing email investigation, and here you can see the entire investigation that has happened. Okay, so because it's a very high resolution image, there is a chance that sometimes, because we had downloaded it in a small window, there is a chance that the image might not be fully highly resolution. Okay, right. So what we can do is we can export the graph as a report as well. Okay, so let me just go ahead and make sure that entity images graph is whole graph, and we click on save. In a couple of seconds, this entire thing will be generated as a report. Okay, as you can see over here, here we have the phishing email investigation part where we can see the entire graph. You can actually take a screenshot of this as well. Okay, right. And if you scroll down, we can find multiple unique entities, the secondary entities that were identified. We had this URL, and similarly document cloud, there were multiple documents that were identified. Okay, right. Similarly, we were also able to identify the email address. Okay, so email address was also one data point. Right. Similarly, you can actually go through the entire document and try to understand it as such. Right. So MySpace entities, aliases, online spam bot, email addresses, IPQS tags, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of information available over here. Okay, right. Now let's just get back to Kali. And here we are, and let me just minimize this thing, close this part, and now let's close Maltego as well. Okay, right, so let's get back. All right, so what did we understand with this particular exercise or this particular project that we just did? Okay, we started off with the person of interest investigation. We had this one data point, we ran all the transforms, we started footprinting and investigating more or analyzing it, right? So we took those data points, analyzed it into information, generated intelligence, and what is the intelligence? The report that we have, the graph that we have. Okay, so here the primary data points are the username, the domain name, and the email address itself, right? So Luis Ennis is the username, optusnet.com.au is the domain name altogether, and together that's also another, the email address is also another data point, right? We were able to see that the username returned MySpace account references, domain name returned another set of data points altogether, and the entire email itself returned with a lot of other information altogether, right? So in a general scenario, you can actually segregate them, move those data points to probably username, email address, and domain name altogether. You can arrange them neatly in a graph and then take the screenshot as such. Okay, right. So let me just quickly show you how exactly you can open the WSL2 desktop folder in your Windows system and how you can access those reports from there. Okay, right. So let me just go ahead and open the file browser or file explorer, and in the left side menu you should be able to see Linux. All right, so as you can see, Kali Linux, Docker Desktop, etc. So we need to open Kali Linux, and inside that we'll go into Home, Kali, and we'll go to Desktop. Okay, right. So all I did was open my file explorer and clicked on Linux, navigated to Kali Linux, Home, Kali, Desktop, and here we can see the phishing mail investigation.jpg, MTGL, and the PDF file as well. Okay, for now let's just copy the graph and the PDF. We'll go ahead to the desktop. We have our folder over here, and inside this investigating a malicious email with Maltego, we just put it over here. Right. Okay, so the project that we have done so far right now is we are basically trying to investigate a phishing email, a malicious email using Maltego. Okay, right now. Let's move ahead. So what have we done so far? We got a lot of data points from SC Toolkit. We then went a little ahead and grabbed all the available information, a little bit of meaningful information using Spiderfoot, and we actually created intelligence using Maltego. We have lots of information, actionable information. We were able to get decision-making pointers, and we were able to conclude a lot of things as such, right? So we basically installed and configured Kali Linux, configured and worked with the Spiderfoot altogether, set up our own Maltego tool, right? And we also configured the necessary transforms, started the graphs, and we were able to actually run an investigation on an email address altogether. Okay, right? With this, you already have your OSINT customized OSINT toolkit now. Okay, right? Now, so the approach that we would need, we have the tools, we have the necessary knowledge, but there is also something called as the necessary approach, right? We need to have a clear-cut approach so that we'll be able to get a clear-cut outcome in OSINT, right? So we we need to follow something called as the intelligence cycle. Okay, so it's an approach where we start off from generate data and reach the actionable intelligence part. Okay, so it's a cyclical process. You start off with the planning, you collect the data, you process the data, you convert it into information, you analyze that information and produce intelligence, and then you report the intelligence altogether. Okay, right? Remember, not all data that you collect might be useful, right? So probably it could be a false positive. Probably the documents that we see are basically not necessary for us, right? So sometimes the data that we collect might contain information that might deceive us. Okay, and while there are a lot of OSINT techniques and mechanisms, not all of them will work for our target, right? Which is why we should follow a meticulous process, as in asking the right questions. Okay, so we'll start off with what we know: email address, domains, images, etc. We'll define the requirements. What exactly do we want to learn, right, or explore? We'll gather the data. We'll analyze the collected data. We'll try to pivot as needed using the gathered data, well data assumptions, and generate and submit a report altogether. And these 5 questions. Right? What was the initial research question? What were you trying to answer? Did you find any keywords as such? What are they? And what are those specific keywords? And why are those specific keywords and all? And where are all the different resources that you want to research? Are there any kind of gaps left behind? Right? What are the timelines? As in by when will you be doing it? What kind of tools that you're using? Why did you line? We have understood how powerful the field of open source intelligence is, right? We have also understood that we can go from data to information to intelligence altogether, right? That is all the various data points that we collect during the collection phase in our investigation approaches are just bits and pieces until and unless we try to analyze them and try to make sense of them, right? And only after we extract the knowledge, only then we'll be able to use it as intelligence, obviously, right? For example, if you look at it, data points like email addresses, name, username, and social networks, they can be taken as inputs for processing data, as in the primary data points, and then they can be used to generate even more information, okay? So even if you consider email address as an example and just the real name as an example, from the email, we'll be able to extract the username and other potential email addresses altogether, right? So similarly, using a combination of email and real name, let's say we get access to the LinkedIn account of an individual, right? We'll be able to get extract personal information like age, CV, city, education, the company that he's working in, and based on that information, we could be, we could go further and extract their financial status, their economic situation, and so on and so forth, right? Similarly, if we get access to various social media accounts, we'll know about their friends and family and the political and religious preferences they have, what kind of activity do they do on the web, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so using these data points, always remember, data can be collected, it can be processed into information, and we extract actionable information, which is called as intelligence. Okay, right? But to make all of this possible, we need to ensure that the OSINT investigation that we are doing follows these three primary principles, right? We should be using the right tools and the right utilities. Okay, we should follow critical thinking approaches, and ultimately, we should have a clear-cut OSINT strategy, right? Remember, critical thinking is the key to conduct any kind of OSINT research altogether, right? Now, let's talk about it, right? So we have so far understood how different tools work, what are the different verticals in OSINT, what are the different flavors of open source intelligence as such, right? Now, let's take a step further, and we have also built, the necessary toolkit, the custom toolkit that we have been using so far, right? So now, basically, now that we have built all this kind of information, let's take a look at how we can build a career out of the things that we have learned so far, right? So you see, we already have understood that on one hand, lots and lots of attacks are happening, as in 81% of the cyber attacks were in the form of phishing, password grabbing, or malware attacks, and so on, right? On the other hand, there are plethora of opportunities, right? Because as and when the attacks increase, at the same time, the opportunities also increase, right? And we already are seeing a lot of gaps in terms of the availability of cybersecurity talent, right? And so much so that the global OSINT market size is expected to grow around 609 crores by 2028, right? 68% of the organizations indicate that they are facing additional risks because there are not many cybersecurity people, right? So we have understood that there is obviously a need for OSINT and cybersecurity professionals as such, right? Now, what are the typical skills and responsibilities that one would need? As in, if at all you want to become an ethical hacker, or if you want to go deeper into the field of open source intelligence, what are the skills that you would need, and what are the responsibilities that you would do, right? To speak from a bigger picture, from an ethical hacker's perspective, you would obviously need skills like networking concepts, operating systems, web applications, the basic cybersecurity knowledge, the hacker mindset altogether, critical thinking, problem solving, and other such things like that, right? Remember, this is not an exhaustive list, and this is not an absolute list as such. This is just to give you a bigger picture of things, okay? Right. Similarly, when you have these skills, there will always be responsibilities, right? You'll be performing penetration testing, protecting the organization, doing investigations, improving cybersecurity, and whatnot, okay? Right. And in fact, if you look at the cybersecurity domain itself as a whole, there are multiple frameworks and multiple resources out there that provide you an overview of various domains and specialty areas, which define different job roles, their tasks, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed. Okay, so this is a really good resource, which is by NICCS, which is a US-based organization. Okay, similarly, there's another one called cyberseek.org, as you can see over here, cyberseek.org, and it provides you roles of different levels and where you can go from here. Right. For example, penetration tester is a very common role, which will touch on every entry level role, and from there you could go to become a cybersecurity engineer, cybersecurity architect, and so on and so forth. Right. Similarly, if you're interested more in terms of investigations, building your open source intelligence skills, as we have discussed here today, right? So you can actually become a cybercrime analyst or cybercrime investigator and go to much more higher levels altogether. Right. Okay. And individuals with skills in open source intelligence, they can pursue a wide range of career opportunities. I mean, we have already understood that there is a demand. We just need to understand what kind of roles are available. Okay. Right. So see, at any given point in the entire world of cybersecurity, we have right now understood that intelligence is going to be the future of cybersecurity. Right. So no matter which role you choose, no matter which particular position you are in, it will always involve intelligence gathering skills. Right. Okay. So there are roles like OSINT analyst, threat intelligence analyst, digital forensic analyst, cybercrime analyst, a fact checker, chief information security officer, SOC manager, researcher, and so on and so forth. Right. So there are multiple roles out there. You just need to build the right skills, and they are available for you. Okay. And these are just a few examples of the diverse career opportunities available for people who have the necessary OSINT skills. Right. And depending on your interest, depending on your expertise, you can also find roles in cybersecurity, law enforcement, journalism, intelligence, legal, consulting, and many other fields where information gathering and analysis are extremely essential. Right. So on that note, we are primarily done with the session. So congratulations to all of you. Right. Because by now you have learned the scope of cybersecurity, you have got a bigger picture of the cybersecurity landscape, and what exactly is the demand for open source intelligence. Intelligence is the future of cybersecurity. Right. And we got to know the need for cybersecurity professionals and how much are people with open source intelligence skills and intelligence skills in demand. Right. We work with various tools in various verticals: image OSINT, domain OSINT, email, username, browser, IP address, basically domain and IP address, and so on. Right. We also perform multiple case studies on geolocation, and then we also perform the social engineering attack. Right. You build your very own customized open source intelligence toolkit altogether. Right. And finally, let's quickly summarize what we have learned in this workshop. Right. In just the past few hours you have spent with us, as promised, you have gained a massive amount of knowledge. Right from zero level, we have understood what is the current landscape of cybersecurity. We try to understand a bit more about the intelligence approach, the different applications that are involved, the different workflows that are involved in OSINT. Moreover, we learned a lot about more tools than we initially planned for. Right. So we explored multiple tools than we initially planned for. Okay. At the same time, we saw how we can build our own custom OSINT toolkit from the ground up, and we actually performed a real-time investigation of malicious email altogether. Okay. Right. And as a next step, you can simply and very happily share your learnings as well. Right. That is, you can actually showcase your project, the one that we have done just now. Right. You can show it on your LinkedIn. You can share screenshots of it, share the workflows of it on LinkedIn and Twitter altogether. Right. You can also highlight the project that you have done. Basically, what have we done? We investigated a real-time investigation of a malicious email using this highly sophisticated tool called as Maltego. Right. Okay. So you can mention the same in your resume as well, correct? And at the same time, if at all you have your own profile or your own web page altogether, you can embed your Maltego OSINT investigation graphs in your web page as well, right? So basically, what you can also do is right after you complete the project, you'll have a form link available for you. You can actually upload the PDF, the report that you have generated in Maltego. You can upload that PDF into the form link given, okay, right? So once again, though it feels like a very small step, you're already months ahead of your peers, right? So that is to ensure that in just a small amount of time, you should be able to learn all these concepts quite rapidly. We've consolidated this entire knowledge base for you, and you've already taken your first step towards this amazing field of cybersecurity altogether, right? So remember, you can share your learnings, you can share your workflows and everything as such, things that we have discussed in the session, okay? You can happily share them online. In addition to that, the report that you have generated, you can highlight it as a project on your resume. You can mention that investigating a malicious email using Maltego, and you can also you also need to submit that report in the form link that is going to be shared with you, okay? Right. So on that note, so the things that we have discussed so far, don't worry if you're unable to remember all the steps. We'll be sharing with you a playbook for the entire workshop, which covers the tools, the frameworks, the resources, and everything as such. Okay, right, so everything will be available in detail. You can follow the steps one by one, and if at all you have any queries, you can submit them in the link that is provided to you. Okay, so on that note, we are done with the session. Okay, so all the best.